Have you ever heard a scream so goddamn terrifying it crawled under your skin and made your soul shrivel up? I'm not talking about some drunk college dude yelling outside your window at 3 a.m. I mean the kind of scream that punches the air out of your lungs, leaving you frozen in the dark, knowing something terrible is about to happen. In the dead hours of the night, when the world feels wrong, too quiet, too still, that's when she comes. Her wail isn't just a scream, it's a warning, a curse, a promise that death is already on its way. This is the story of the Banshee, a ghostly messenger from the other side, and if you hear her, it's already too fucking late. The Banshee. Ever heard of her? If not, buckle the fuck up, because this ain't some ordinary ghost story. The Banshee is straight out of Irish folklore, and she's not just a spooky figure lurking in the dark. She's what you'd call a harbinger of death. Yeah, that's right. If you hear her wail, it's not a good thing. It's an announcement that someone you know is about to kick the bucket. And once that scream hits your ears, there's no going back. It's like death sending you a save the date, and the Banshee's your fucked up party planner. So, what's the deal with her? Why does this pale, screaming figure have people scared shitless for centuries? Well, for one, her presence is haunting as hell. She doesn't just show up like a normal ghost. She's got this whole vibe. Sometimes she's an old hag with a face that'll give you nightmares for weeks. Other times, she's a beautiful woman with hair like silver silk. But make no mistake, no matter how she shows up, she's got one job: to let you know someone is about to die. And that's where things get creepy. The Banshee isn't a residual ghost or some random spirit. She's tied into some straight up supernatural, otherworldly shit. Her connection to the afterlife, death, and fate makes her not just terrifying, but also fascinating. It's like she's not just part of the story, she is the story. In this video, I'm fixing to break it all down, where the Banshee comes from, the folklore that made her infamous, and how her legend spread like wildfire across the centuries. We'll dig into some sightings too. Yeah, people still claim to hear her screaming in the middle of the night. And of course, we'll get into the possible explanations. Is she just a myth? Or could there be some real-world shit behind the legend? And hey, just because this legend goes way the fuck back, doesn't mean it's stuck in the past. Her story? It's far from over. All right, let's dive into the roots of this creepy-ass legend. The Banshee isn't just some random spook that popped up one Halloween and stuck around. Nah, this story goes way back, deep into the guts of ancient Irish mythology. She's a siren spirit of doom, singing exit music for a relative of the dead. The name Banshee comes from the Irish Banshee. Translated literally, that's woman of the fairy mound. Or the modern interpretation is woman of the other world. So, what the fuck is a Banshee? A ghost? A demon? A fairy? A wraith? Technically, yes, she's a little bit of all of them. But there's a little nuance to be found in defining the Banshee. This was the best all-around definition I could find. A banshee is a supernatural being from Gaelic Celtic folklore that takes the form of a shrieking or sometimes singing woman. Often associated with particular families, banshees warn of the impending death of someone in the household. In a nutshell, she's a form of fairy that's got one foot planted in our world and the other in the realm of the dead, which makes her job simple and terrifying. Show up when someone is about to fucking die and either scream or sing to the relatives. Man, that's gotta be a tough crowd. As Ireland and Scotland underwent Christianization, this folkloric interpretation of banshees as ancient Irish pagan gods living as fairies was eventually changed to the banshee was the ghost of dead family members. Now, the banshee doesn't stick to just one look. Oh, fuck no. She can show up in several different forms, and each one is designed to scare the absolute shit out of you. One version of her is a young woman, almost beautiful, with flowing red hair and a silver gown that catches the moonlight just right. Think of her as the kind of ghost you might catch a glimpse of on a misty night. Just enough beauty to pull you in. But trust me, you don't want to meet her. On the flip side, she can also appear as an old hag, wrinkled, hunched over with wild gray hair and red eyes that stare right through you. She's usually wrapped up in a tattered gray cloak, like she just dragged herself out of the grave. This is the one that sneaks into your nightmares. If she shows up looking like this, it's bad news. Real bad. They might be seen as a shrouded figure flying by in the moonlight. There are even accounts of a banshee appearing as a headless woman, naked from the waist up, and carrying a bowl of blood. And if those weren't terrifying enough, the banshee doesn't always stick to human form. Sometimes she can shapeshift into an animal, like a crow, a weasel, or a black dog. In Irish folklore, animals like these were often linked to the supernatural. And if you see one in the wild acting fucked up, it's a sign you're in some deep shit. Being in the fairy category, they're smaller in stature, between 1 and 4 feet tall. In different folk tales, banshees can be seen in one of two ways. Either as a spirit who mourns the dead and shares the sorrows of the family to whom they're connected, or as a creature that hates the family and whose cries are a celebration of the suffering of the designated family. The song of the friendly banshee is said to be a soft, mournful chant to announce the upcoming death of a family member, and this banshee exists as a fellow mourner, grieving the deceased. The hateful banshee's call, on the other hand, is a fiendish screech, a dark howl of delight for the oncoming tragedy. The Irish don't have a corner on the market when it comes to the banshee. Up in the Scottish Highlands, the banshee is more commonly known as the Bean Nye, or the washerwoman. This Scottish banshee is known to wash the burial clothes of those destined to die, while in other iterations, it's the death shroud or burial shroud the washerwomen clean. Interestingly, the washerwoman iteration of the banshee also has a parallel Celtic lore in a couple of places in France. Now, let's talk about what makes the banshee so unique. She's not just some aimless spirit wandering around scaring people for the hell of it. The banshee serves as a death messenger, tied specifically to Ireland's old families, those with deep Irish roots. I'm talking about the historical bloodline of the Milesians, the last folks to come into Ireland and colonize it. So we're talking about last names that start with O, Mick, or Mac. There are a few exceptions to this. So yeah, there's this whole blood purity and ancestry component to Banshee lore too. But if you're worried about encountering a Banshee, statistically, you're in the clear. But if your last name starts with O, Mick, or Mac, let me know in the comments if you've heard stories about the Banshee, or if you or a relative have heard or seen one. Her role is like giving a warning, like a get your shit together because someone's about to fucking die kind. She doesn't exactly cause death though. She's just the messenger, showing up to let you know that death's already on the way and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. Banshees can travel outside of Ireland. Banshees that have attached themselves to Irish families will follow those families abroad for generations. Thanks to the Irish sprawling out, there could be Banshees all over the world. Whee! The Banshee's wail, sometimes described as a scream, other times as a low, mournful cry, is said to echo through the night. This eerie sound ties into an ancient Irish tradition known as keening. Keening was a traditional mourning practice performed at funerals by women, usually older, who would cry, wail, and sing haunting songs to honor the dead. The good ones were in high demand and mostly worked at upscale funerals. Keeners were usually paid with alcohol instead of money. So it's no surprise keeners were usually alcoholics. Keening was supposed to make it easier for the soul to leave the body and transition to the afterlife. Psychologically, it helped family members deal with the pain and grief. The Banshee's scream is a supernatural version of this. She's keening for the soon-to-be dead, giving their spirit a proper send-off before they're even dead. Keening is similar to a chant, only performed with a strained, nasally voice. Keeners punctuate their melodies with bursts of weeping, as well as moments of silence. The results are both incredibly sorrowful and undeniably eerie. Perfect Banshee music for sure. This idea of keening connects the Banshee with Ireland's deep cultural traditions around death and mourning. Death wasn't just something to be feared, it was something sacred, part of a natural cycle. The Banshee embodies that belief, but with a horrifying twist. Her presence means death is close, and her wail is a twisted echo of the old mourning songs. It's believed that the intensity of her wail corresponds to the closeness of the death she heralds, ranging from a soft lament to a piercing scream. She has long, streaming hair, which she may be seen combing, with some legends specifying she can only wail while combing her hair. Another part of the folklore is if you're walking through the forest and see a comb, don't pick it up. Don't even touch it, unless you want a visit from the Banshee. Banshees aren't strictly unique to Ireland. Wailing and singing at burials are found in funeral rites from ancient Rome to China. Notably, there's an ancient custom called uppery in areas of southern India, in which women relatives of the deceased wail and sing a largely improvised song that is both lamentation and eulogy, which very closely parallels the Irish tradition of keening. But here's the thing, the Banshee isn't just about death. She's also about inevitability. Her wail isn't a warning you can outrun or avoid. It's not like she's giving you a heads up so you can change fate. No, when you hear her scream, the shit's already in motion. It's happening, and all you can do is sit back and watch it unfold. That's part of what makes her so terrifying. She's not evil, exactly. Well, maybe just a little bit of a masochist. Her connection to specific families adds another eerie layer to the legend. Imagine that. Your whole family line is marked by this ghostly messenger, generation after generation. Whenever someone's time is up, there she is, wailing in the night, making sure you know that the Grim Reaper's on the way. That kind of shit sticks with people. It's why the Banshee has endured for so long, because deep down, we all know that death is coming, sooner or later. The Banshee just makes sure we hear it coming. So that's the folklore. Ancient as hell, terrifying as fuck, and soaked in enough eerie symbolism to make you run out of toilet paper. Now that we've covered the roots of this legend, let's take it to the next level. I'm talking about sightings of the Banshee. Oh yeah, people are still claiming to hear her scream, even today. There are very few written accounts of people actually seeing banshees, but two of the most famous ones are by a king and a noblewoman. The first account dates back to 1437, involving King James I of Scotland. One fateful night, a wailing woman dressed in white appeared before him, her mournful cries echoing through the dark corridors of his castle. She warned him that the Earl of Athol was plotting his assassination. King James, shaken but still skeptical, he eventually confided this terrifying omen to his personal advisor. Just a day later, the chilling prophecy unfolded as the Earl of Athol and a group of other Scottish nobles ambushed the king, leading to some extreme butchery. King James was among those killed, proving that the Banshee's warning was not just a haunting vision, but a fatal prophecy. The next encounter comes from an English noblewoman named Lady Anne Fanshawe in 1649. Lady Anne was married to Lord Richard Fanshawe, who was the Secretary of War to King Charles I. This was during the English Civil War, 1642 to 1651. As a lady of the court, Anne Fanshawe followed her husband Richard across Europe, supporting the royalist cause while juggling the chaos of raising 14 kids. Only 5 survived to adulthood. Man, that's fucking brutal. Over the years, Anne became a woman of letters, publishing all sorts of shit, from histories to cookbooks to folktales. But her most famous work is a memoir about her time in King Charles' court. According to the lore, in the midst of the war, she ended up living temporarily in Cork, Ireland, while her husband was on a diplomatic mission. They were staying at a friend's estate when Cork rose up against the king and they had to retreat. They ended up at a castle owned by Lady Honora O'Brien. One night at 1 a.m., a freaky-ass voice jolted Anne awake. When she peeked out from the bed curtains, she saw a ghostly woman leaning in from the window of her upper floor room. Anne described her as being lit by the moon, wearing white, with red hair and a ghastly complexion. The woman wailed, "Ahone, Ahone, Ahone," and then, with a sound more like wind than breath, she disappeared. Lady Anne said the woman's body appeared looking more like a thick cloud than an actual person. Terrified, Anne woke her husband, who had slept through the whole fucking creepy scene. He believed her, having heard similar ghost stories from folks while traveling in Ireland. The next morning, they discovered that a member of Lady Honora's household had died around 2 a.m. Then, Lady Honora admitted that the guest room had once belonged to a woman who had been murdered by the castle's previous owner after she got pregnant. Whenever someone in the house was about to kick the bucket, the Banshee, the ghost of the murdered pregnant woman, would show up to warn guests of the impending doom. Needless to say, the Fanshaws packed up and left that castle faster than you can say, "Holy shit!" As they traveled to Spain, Anne documented her haunting experience. She also learned that Ahone is a phonetic spin on the ancient Irish word Ocon, loosely translating to alas, a cry of pure despair. Banshees have also been known to announce the deaths of significant persons regardless of their heritage. In 1801, Sir Jonah Barrington, then chief of the British forces in Ireland, was awoken one night by a banshee at his window that cried the name Rossmore 3 times. Robert Cunningham, the first Baron Rossmore, was a close friend and had been one of Barrington's guests that evening. The following morning, Barrington learned that he had died in the night at just about the time of that ghostly visit. Moving on to a more recent sighting. In August 2000, Tim, only 8 years old at the time, woke up late one night and glanced out his bedroom window. What he saw shook him to his core. He's convinced it was a banshee. Skeptics might roll their eyes, but what Tim witnessed matched similar stories, including one his grandfather shared about an encounter near Sandy Mount. The figure glowed with a fluorescent yellow hue, brushing its hair as it floated toward the window. Parts of its face were missing flesh, and its open mouth gave it an eerie, lifeless expression. The thing wore what looked like a dress or nightgown, and it kept coming closer. Tim stood frozen, caught somewhere between awe and sheer terror. As it drifted closer to the window, Tim felt something strange, like the figure was silently beckoning him to stay, as if waiting was the only option. But as the creature neared, reality snapped back and fear took over. Tim screamed for his parents, breaking whatever spell had held him there. Just a few days later, they got terrible news. A family friend had died of a heart attack while working on his tractor. Looking back, Tim can't shake the feeling that the banshee was there that night to deliver a warning. All right, let's dig into both sides of this creepy-ass legend. The logical takes and the supernatural explanations. You can decide where you land by the end of it. First, let's get skeptical. Not everyone buys the whole spirit from beyond theory. Some experts say sightings of the banshee could be chalked up to stress, grief, or trauma. When someone's dealing with a lot of emotional shit, especially around death, their brain can play tricks on them, creating hallucinations or weird sensations. Maybe hearing a wail or seeing a figure at the window is just the mind's fucked up way of coping with the fear of loss. Then there's the natural side. Have you ever heard a vixen fox scream in the dead of night? That sound could scare the piss out of anyone. It's high-pitched and eerily human. Barn owls can also make some unholy noises that might sound like wailing to someone unfamiliar to them. Skeptics argue that a lot of so-called Banshee encounters are just animals out in the wild making noises that people misinterpret, especially in the dark when every little sound feels like a threat. And let's not forget the power of folklore. Sometimes people hear these stories so often that their brains start to connect unrelated events back to the legend. Someone hears a weird noise, a relative dies, and boom, it was a banshee. It's like confirmation bias in overdrive. We want to believe in the eerie stuff because it makes life feel more mysterious. And besides, a good fucking ghost story is hard to resist. On the flip side of that, from a spiritual standpoint, some folks say the Banshee is more than just a ghost. She's a guardian, tied to certain ancient Irish families. The belief is that she's connected to clans, sticking with them through the centuries to warn of death within the bloodline. The idea here is that the Banshee isn't evil. She's like a supernatural messenger, making sure people know when someone's time is almost up. Some even think the Banshee has roots in big league mythology. There's a theory that she's connected to the Morrigan, a badass Celtic goddess associated with war, death, and fate. The Morrigan would take on different forms, sometimes as a crow, sometimes as a washerwoman cleaning bloody clothes on a riverbank, foreshadowing doom. That shape-shifting stuff lines up with Banshee stories too, since she can show up as a young woman, an old hag, or even a crow. So yeah, maybe the Banshee isn't just a ghost with a grudge. She might be something way older, a piece of ancient mythology still lingering around to fuck with people today. Folklore like the Banshee sticks around because, let's face it, humans have always been scared shitless of death and the unknown. These stories aren't just old-timey ghost tales, they're warnings wrapped in myth, passed from one generation to the next. They get retold not just because they're spooky, but because they hit on something deep. Our fear of what's actually waiting for us at the end of the line. Whether it's a pale woman wailing outside your window, or just a strange chill creeping up your spine, folklore keeps those fears alive and kicking. But here's a real kick in the ass. What if it's not just a story? What if somewhere there's a grim reaper-like being out there watching and waiting? Maybe the Banshee doesn't give a shit whether you believe in her or not. She's got her own thing going on, showing up when death is near, leaving behind that eerie, mournful wail. And honestly, isn't that the scariest part? The idea that no matter how skeptical we think we are, there's still a part of us that wonders, could she be real? Could she show up one night and wail just one more time? So, what do you think? Is the Banshee just some ancient Irish tale blown way out of proportion? Or could she be lurking somewhere, waiting for the next poor soul whose time is about to run out? Sleep tight, folks, 'cause who knows, she might be fucking closer than you think. If you vibed with this video, don't forget to tap that like button and subscribe. That way you won't miss out on more of my fucked up commentary. And besides, I really do appreciate it. So, the Banshee, death omen or just a loud-ass ghost? Let me know down in the comments. Oh, don't forget to check out my kick-fucking-ass merch. The link's in the description. I've got Scaredator t-shirts and tanks, Stay Creepy t-shirts, tanks, mugs, stickers, and all kinds of epic stuff. Until next time, y'all keep it real, keep it chill, and stay creepy! Catch you on the flip. Thank you for watching and listening until the very end. You kicked total ass.